Today's episode is coming to you thanks in part to Bike Pittsburgh and their Open Streets PGH events. And big news, the next Open Streets is running through Lawrenceville and the Strip District on Sunday, July 27th. This 3.5-mile car-free route takes you from 13th and Smallman all the way past Allegheny Cemetery. And when the roads are made car-free, this new sense of community connection happens. There is so much to do along this stretch, and you can join thousands of people who are going to be biking, walking, and rolling through the route and supporting local businesses along the way. See the route at openstreetspgh.org and follow at openstreetspgh.
CityCast Pittsburgh is supported today by the Heinz History Center and their newest exhibition, Pittsburgh's Hidden History. It is a cornucopia of curiosity, a magical menagerie of memory, and a little bit of this and that. There are flowery couches, relics from Kennywood, even a collection of shivs. If you listen to this show a lot, you know we are loving this. It is truly mind-boggling to see how the curators brought together such a wide range of rarely seen artifacts to tell Pittsburgh stories like never before. To buy your tickets and learn more, visit HeinzHistoryCenter.org.
Today on CityCast Pittsburgh, the mall scene here is kind of in a weird place. Century 3 is long gone and partially demolished, while Pittsburgh Mills is hanging on by a thread, though there are some new reports that the mall's owner is quietly looking to sell it off. Meanwhile, Ross Park is bringing in shiny luxury brands, and Walmart just bought Monroeville Mall for a lot of money. So host Megan Harris is talking to a mall expert to make sense of why certain malls thrive while others flop, and to predict the future of retail shopping in our region. It's Monday, July 7th. I'm Sophia Lowe, and here's what Pittsburgh's talking about.
I'm with Matt Newton, a Pittsburgher who wrote a book called Shopping Mall. Matt, we love a straightforward title. Welcome back to CityCast.
Glad to be back. Thanks for having me, Megan. Appreciate it.
I know you've written so much over the years about like what, the mall heyday used to be like, specifically Monroeville Mall. Vibe set for the younger listeners out there. What was it like kind of back in your day?
Yeah, for context, I was like a kid in the 1980s and like a teen in the 1990s. So I definitely was in that sort of like golden age of the mall. So yeah, so kind of growing up for me, it was just, the mall was always busy. There was crowds, there was like teenagers everywhere. It was kind of like this meeting place. Folks would gather at like the arcades, folks would gather at like the food court. I write about it in the book, but yeah, it was just sort of like Friday night and Saturday night. The mall was just like, this big sort of like reunion of whatever that area was. Like every high school kid was there and every like random adult that you knew from the neighborhood, so it was kind of, it was kind of a fun and I guess weird vibe in general, so.
Yeah. You've written and too about like smoking, like seeing 12-year-olds smoking. Like it's like, like low-key childcare in its way, because parents would just like drop teenagers off and be like, see you in a few hours.
Right. And that's also because it was like the first, especially in the suburbs where, most malls are located, it's like that first bit of independence you get as a kid. So like, when you're 10, 11, 12 years old, like you'll get dropped off, and it's like, you don't know what to do with yourself, and it's like, so it's like first taste of freedom sort of in a weird, but sort of controlled environment,
Yeah, totally. There were adults around. They just weren't your adults. So like more freedom.
Right.
When would you say that malls became like a big thing here in Pittsburgh? Like who was first? And then like, did we have a best mall?
Oh, yeah. That's a good question. Yeah, I would say as far as the time period when malls started popping up here was like early 1960s. The first, what's considered enclosed mall would have been Northway Mall, which I think was built in 1962. And then I don't know when it became enclosed because it was more of a strip mall. Then they kind of glassed it in and it became sort of like technically one of the first malls in the city. And then you go from there to South Hills Village was like purpose built to be an enclosed mall, so that was 1965. So early 60s to mid 60s. And then, of course, my favorite mall comes along in 1969, which is, Monroeville Mall.
And we got Century 3 a little while later. Like I learned from you that name was in reference to the bicentennial, like entering our third century. It's wild to now think like so many of these places are either gone or so changed too.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, Century 3, I think I haven't been by there recently, but I know it's almost all demolished last I was through there.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, so it's a little bittersweet to see, but I guess it had been declining for some years. So, but yeah, and that was so Century 3 lasted a good amount, built in 1979, had a good run, but still, yeah. And I mean, and that's sort of one of those first malls that like in the area, I think that was like when it was still open, people were going and still open, but very sparsely populated by businesses. That's when people were going to like what you'd call like urbex, whatever, like exploring. Like I feel like that's like
Hmm.
people's curiosity. It was almost like more of a curiosity destination sometimes than like a shopping destination once there was like not as many stores left.
Yeah, and of course the mall walking population can't leave them behind either. I mean, what is the difference in your mind between like a mall that's like like what we call like mostly dead versus like a ghost mall? Because I know you have feelings about the terminology there.
Yeah, well, I kind of think of a dead mall, I guess, as a mall that's still technically open, but barely has any actual. There's always like a Bath and Body Works is like, it's like Bath and Body Works can like never die. It's always like the last national chain to go in a mall, it seems like.
Yeah, and I feel like there's always a local comic book store that's like holding out the hope, you
Oh
know?
yeah, yeah. That's definitely. And then, there's always a store that has dream catchers, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
which is sad because malls basically killed mom and pop businesses. But whenever there's more mom and pop businesses in a mall than there are national chains, it's like usually like a sign of like it's on its way out. And so I kind of think of
Okay.
that as sort of like a dead mall where the occupancy is very low. Like they might be like 20% occupied or something like that.
And it's mostly local.
Yeah, mostly local shops. And I sort of think of a ghost mall as a mall that's actually closed and like shuttered. But people are like, that's when people are kind of like gravitating to it because they want to like walk around outside and see what's going on, see if they can like peek inside or maybe find a way to get inside.
So ghost being the afterlife, dead meaning like we have no purpose for this space at this moment.
I guess, yeah, that's a good way to put it, I think. Yeah, and then like, and also like, I kind of think of as like freshly demolished malls or sort of ghost malls too, because there's, especially in Ohio, there was like the triangle of malls out there, like Randall Park, and there was like two other ones that are like, those are like pilgrimage sites for people. They were even going there as they're being demolished. It was just like a thing that people seem to do. So I feel like the ghost side of it is like where people are still, like pining for, for the days of when they could go into these places, but they're like pretty much almost out of, completely out of reach at that point.
Yeah, I mean, and we have a fair number of, I mean, I think they might qualify as ghosts. I'm curious your feelings about this here in the Pittsburgh area. I mean, there is the Monroeville Mall. Like, would you call it dead or is it a ghost yet?
I think the Monroeville Mall is actually like kind of it's like not exactly dead yet. So, and also they have, they have investment, like new businesses still go into there. So it's like a weird one, Monroeville's weird because
It's on life
like,
support, maybe?
I would say it's like end of life care. Yeah. So it's
Hospice. Got it.
unfortunate. It's unfortunate, but I feel like, and but who knows? Things are changing, I guess. But
And then Allegheny Center, used to be a big mall. Now it's a co-working space, among other things. It holds a lot of events and things like that.
yeah, I mean, that's definitely like I would say. I mean, that's a ghost mall at this point, if not beyond. Yeah, like because whatever, what's it called? Nova Center, is that right?
Or Nova Place.
Nova Place, I think you're right. Yeah, it's and it to me, it's like it's part of that repurposing of a mall, but like something about it is like terribly sad to me. So because Allegheny Center,
I think it's all the darkness and the carpet for me.
there's a lot of carpet in there, which I guess was like their way of like not having to rip up the old mall floor. But yeah, that's probably part of it. But also like what I liked so much about Allegheny Center Mall was it was like, because since malls are such a suburban like phenomenon, I always kind of loved going in there. Like my ride into the city, like every once in a while when I was a kid with my grandmother, and like we'd go there, and it was like that was like a mall you'd go to on like a bus, and I was like, oh, that's exciting. But it was weird because it was like it's in an urban space, but it's totally like a weird suburban like zone. Then yeah, who knows? I always liked Allegheny Center because it was just weird.
Yeah, I mean, well, what happened to those spaces? Do you remember like at what point like Pittsburgh just stopped caring about whatever it was that they had to offer?
Yeah, I mean, I think places like that, what happens is like, late 90s, early 2000s, like the internet starts to take like a bite out of all that business, and like people are, like early days of Amazon, all that kind of stuff. And then also I think it's like a generational thing, like people, like every generation kind of has their use for a mall when it first came in. You figure the folks who are like older, like they would maybe go there to hang out, like when malls were first around. But then you have like your mall walkers, like your senior citizens who are kind of hanging out. And it's like as the mall ages, like all of these people sort of age out of it, whether they're not necessarily even shopping there, but they're like, my age, maybe like in their like mid to late 40s.
And they remember what 12-year-olds did there on their own. And so they're not sending their own 12-year-olds there anymore.
Right. And so I feel like right now is like the weirdest time for malls because so many are like have failed and are gone. And then so many that are still around are around they're like all being sort of tailored to like certain populations that live around them, and I think that's actually what is kind of interesting right now, but it's, so.
I didn't realize how much we'd be talking about end of life care. This is great.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to hospice it up.
This episode is brought to you by Visibility, an organization helping people who are blind or visually impaired explore all that's possible in their lives. Vision loss doesn't mean you have to sacrifice your independence or stop doing what you love. You just need to do it differently, and that's where Visibility comes in. They take a comprehensive approach to vision care. So they do vision screenings for kids and adults, but also provide transportation assistance, at-home occupational therapy, even employment support. Visibility says they take a personalized and holistic approach so their clients can maintain their lifestyles and keep pursuing their passions. Visit visibility.org or follow them on social media to learn how Visibility can assist you, your loved ones, and your friends.
This episode is supported by Crossover Coliseum. And if you're thinking gladiator fights, naval battles, mythical monsters, you are very much on the right track. Crossover Coliseum is a live gladiator-themed game show, and it's basically a combination of Gladiator, Minute to Win It, and Dungeons & Dragons. Local Pittsburghers will face wild challenges for charity, and you get to vote on the outcome. Besides enjoying the live performance, you also get to test your skill and luck in mini-games, plus sip on some signature cocktails. All of this takes place on Thursday, July 17th at the Oaks Theater in Oakmont. Buy your tickets today on Eventbrite, and you can get a 25% discount with the code DIECAST. That's DIECAST. Learn more at crossovergames.org and make your boring nights history.
This episode is brought to you by San Pellegrino Ciao, a new kind of flavor sparkling water. The kind made with real fruit juice, a pinch of Sicilian salt, and the sparkle of the Italian sun. With no added sugar and just 10 or less calories per can, enjoy. With love, from Italy. By San Pellegrino Ciao now.
Why do you think there's so much nostalgia about these spaces? Like you and I have talked about Century 3 kind of at length. You were on an older episode of CityCast Pittsburgh. Like, is that specific to Pittsburgh that we have such big feelings when a mall closes or a mall changes?
Yeah, I definitely don't think it's specific to Pittsburgh. I mean, I think Pittsburghers are greatly nostalgic, but I think that happens in lots of cities, like think of like a Cleveland or, there's so many places that like I feel like I've been to where there's that same level of nostalgia. For example, when I was writing the book, I was real into like the idea of like mall groups on Facebook, like people who were like eulogizing malls and people also who were just like would go to like, because this was like at the peak of like probably almost like as BuzzFeed was like fading out. Like I remember seeing a bunch of BuzzFeed posts that I was like researching, and it's like people in the comments are like, of like a post that's like, 15 mall photos that'll leave you like breathless or something like that for, how far they've fallen. And then it's like people in the comments are just spilling their guts. You can tell that they're almost like weeping as they're typing, so because it's like these places they were so important for such a concentrated amount of time to whoever frequented them. I think it almost instantly creates nostalgia because usually you were at a mall a lot and then you weren't. And then, so when you go back, some years later, 5-10 years later, you're sort of, you're almost instantly transported to like this, whole nostalgia sort of like zone,
Yeah. Let's talk about a few of them that have managed to escape that transitional period. Actually, maybe we'll start with the in-between one. There's Pittsburgh Mills, which feels like a stretch, like it is still open, but its fate seems super uncertain at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, Pittsburgh Mills, I think, is just such a good example of like a mall that they were trying to make it like a destination for folks because it was originally going to have a NASCAR cafe. Like they actually had a Lucky Strike Lanes there that was like just an LA based, like bowling and like basically like a bowling and place to bowl and drink. And like that was there for, I don't even know, not very long. I remember it was there and then it wasn't. Same with like, they had like a Johnny Rocket. So there's all this like big chain, sort of like national chain stuff that they were hoping was going to make it a destination.
That makes sense though, because like even just the way it's built, like high up on the hill there where you can kind of see it from 28, but like you do have to kind of want to be there to go over.
Yeah, yeah. And now it's like, it literally is like almost undrivable up there. Like when you go up, I was actually up that way not that long ago. And people like I know and my family and friends were just like, oh, the potholes up there. So, and I thought, oh, people are just dramatic about potholes. It's literally cratered. Like it's so hard to drive around up there. And I was just like, it just made me sad because it was like, yeah, the actual pavement is just crumbling.
Yeah. And I mean, at this point, gosh, Fraser Township over there has spent, I think years at this point arguing with the owners of Pittsburgh Mills and trying to get them to do things. Like there's litigation at this point. It's kind of wild. What about Ross Park Mall? Like it seems like, at least from the outside in, that one's kind of thriving.
Yeah, I think that's kind of one of my examples. I feel like, which I've actually been more interested in. I don't know if I could write about malls again, but I sort of think about like, maybe I would. But
I think you would. I always think you can dig deep for that one.
Well, but like, what interests me about Ross Park is it's like they have like doubled and tripled down on just this idea of like bringing absolute like affluence to that mall, like as much as they can. I mean, it's
a lot of luxury brands and also a lot of like really big investment into specific stuff. Like that Dick's Sporting Goods House of Sport thing is over there now, and it's just it's enormous.
Yeah, and it's things like that like they're definitely like a destination because it has like a climbing wall and it has like an outdoor field that I don't even know what you do on that outdoor field, but I'm assuming like football or something. But like
I was actually just over there, and granted, there were no teams or anything, but there were a lot of moms and strollers.
So maybe it's like the
it's
default.
Like mall walking, but the next generation.
And in a weird sort of cage because it's like all caged in.
1,000%.
But yeah, so I think Ross Park sort of like is a good example of a mall, and it's also a Simon mall, and like Simon properties are like they're all over so they're basically also like a chain. It's just like this affluence of Nordstrom and there's like a Gucci store and there's Crate and Barrel and all those things that they have out there. And but what always interested me about malls, like when I was researching the book, was this idea of malls as exclusionary spaces, and I really think about like Ross Park's on a bus line, sure, but it's also like when you go out there, and I'm by no means an affluent person necessarily. Like my tax bracket is not like affording Gucci and things like that. And my 14-year-old loves to go out there, and so we'll go out there, and it's like, yeah, I just feel like it's a different breed of person, kind of. It's like all your folks that are always, like when you're a parent and everyone's talking about like where they're going to go to get the best schools. It's like that's basically like it's out in the north. Everything's in the north, and it's like that's kind of where. That's where all that money is kind of concentrated in that mall as far as investment and like trying to keep these folks happy out there, And so it's like nothing against North Hills. I mean, but I do think I think it is like this concentration of wealth in that mall that they're really trying to like appeal to a very, very high end sort of like consumer.
Yeah, the fancy people go up to Ross Park. I mean, but across the street, just about, it's up the street, I guess, a little bit on McKnight, but there's also the block at Northway.
Right.
Which is
was
like
Northway Mall.
Exactly. But it doesn't, it's not a mall, but it does kind of still feel a little bit like a mall.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, and I think that's the one that has the Nordstrom rack and it has like the different, like it is trying to
They have like the factory stores that like give you the impression of getting a discount.
Right. When you're definitely not, but that's where the folks who are like in the market for the discount will go. Yeah. And it's, and there's like a Container Store. So it's kind of cool that it didn't completely flounder and fall apart. So that's nice, but
yeah. Well, and I don't want to leave out our South Hills neighbors. There's South Hills Village and also Robinson.
Right. Yeah. And South Hills Village seems pretty stable for the most part. Last time I was out there, they've got like a bunch of restaurants. They've got, most storefronts seem to be full. And Robinson's another one that seems like it's doing okay too, but
it doesn't feel as fancy on the inside, but like it's serviceable as malls go. The last time I was there.
Yeah, I haven't been there in a while, but yeah, I mean, I usually stop by just to kind of see how things are going,
Yeah, I've got to check in on the children.
Yeah.
I mean, if you zoom out, do you think like malls proper, like just the whole concept still makes sense for Pittsburgh?
I don't know. I think it makes sense sort of as much as they can adapt to the population. I don't know if that makes sense, but Ross Park and they obviously have like a big backer in the Simon Group, but like that has made sense out there because they've just keep adjusting it to like the population out there. And I do think what doesn't make sense anymore though is like a destination potentially like a Pittsburgh Mills that never fully was ever like fully formed even, because it was like even from the beginning it seems like it was already missing vital components to like keep it like healthy for the long term. So I do think it's like it does feel to be, and I'm not trying to keep going back to this this idea of affluence, but I think that's a big part of it. Like I think this idea of like if a mall's in an area or pretty close to an area that has like that the tax bracket's higher and the folks have more money to spend, those seem to be able to like stand alone as malls that are still predominantly just retail and don't bring in other things, because that's what some malls do, where they bring in Westmoreland Mall is a good example out in Westmoreland County, which is they brought in the casino, which is like, I mean, you go out there like you can't find a parking space because it's like the whole mall. I mean, all of the parking is taken up.
Well, I was about to say, I mean, is anybody going into the mall or are they just spending money at the casino?
I would say it's probably 60% of that parking, is taken up by casino, like, patrons. Their model seems to be switching because they have a very robust, like the fans of Greengate Mall, which was down the road for a little bit on 30, that went out of business in the early 2000s. Like those folks all like that Facebook group like loves Westmoreland Mall and Westmoreland Mall News, and like they talk about it. And supposedly there's like something like a 8 or 12 floor hotel going in there like in the next like couple of years. So
is that the key then? Like it's not, I feel like when we were young, I only came in a little bit after you for mall culture, but like it seemed like there was something for everybody, or at least that was the idea. But now maybe you have to pick a lane. Like you have to find a niche and target your store to that niche of customer. Like is that the future of malls?
I think it kind of is. I mean, I think that's what everyone's been sort of, I guess, angling towards with most of these malls, where you have like a good example would be a lot of malls took on movie theaters as a way, because it used to be like movie theaters were always like just right in like the annex of a mall, or they were somewhere. But it seems like a lot of malls took on movie theaters to like try to Pittsburgh Mills is a good example, and that didn't work at all. Although it's still functioning, that movie theater, strangely. But
the one in Southside Works was like that too. Like it wasn't.
Right.
It was more of an outdoor mall kind of, but like it had that movie theater, which was the major tenant for a very long time.
Right, and then it's weird because the movie theater has worked for something. Like Monroeville Mall is a good example. That movie theater seems to attract people on a regular basis. Potentially one of the main attractions out that way.
Well, that and like until somewhat recently, a Scare House, like were the only two things I mostly saw in that mall.
Yeah, right. But I do think that's probably why Walmart, which is actually, Walmart purchased the Monroeville Mall for like $34 million or something. But
which feels like a wild figure. Like I know it's a lot of land, but it's also a lot to fix up and do something with. Like it seems out of scope for what we expect from a Walmart.
So they brought in, Cypress Equities is who Walmart kind of has like brought on as like this third party to basically work on the Monroeville Mall site. And I guess I see that as potentially like they must have some vision in mind, and it does seem like there's the potential partial demolition of things. It seems like from what things I've read, or they'll just like really use that annex might go away and they might just build. I mean, there's been talk of like does a Walmart get dropped in there, because they've been trying to get a Walmart into Monroeville for like 20 some years or something like that.
But another thing on the like potential wish list that we've seen fairly recently was like also residential space, which again just seems like a strange move for Walmart.
I guess they're in that sort of like sector now where they're like doing all these like developments, and there's other examples.
Can you imagine renting an apartment from Walmart?
It would be a bummer, but I mean, I don't, but maybe not. I mean, maybe it'll be very reasonable, with the prices. You never know. But yeah, it would be strange. And, but everybody's been trying to do that, like mixed use thing, I feel like, for years. I mean, that was the beginning of malls originally, like Southdale Center in Edina, Minnesota, like 1955, I think. And like the original, like Victor Gruen, who's like the godfather of malls, like he's the Austrian architect who fled sort of like Nazis in Europe and came here to kind of end up becoming like a mall builder, which was not his plan. And I think he kind of, by the end of his life, hated malls. But he, his original plan was like, there's going to be a mall in the middle, and surrounding it would be like man-made lakes and like walkways and housing and like apartments and, doctor's offices, all this. And that's like, and, all that America.
It sounds like a suburb.
Right. I think he had much grander plans. And I think he, And all the basically like business owners and investors kind of clung to was the idea of like the giant box and
Capitalism.
right, and park and like a giant park, like acres of parking around it. That's kind of all they took from it, and I think he was completely disturbed by that. So
yeah, well, bring us home, Matt. I mean, do you have any predictions maybe for Pittsburgh malls? Any of the ones we talked about, or I don't know, anything that you think is coming maybe for us in the next 5 to 10 to 15?
Yeah, well, I think, I guess, yeah, one thing that kind of strikes me, and I'm starting to see it, so that's why I'm like mentioning it. But I do see whenever Walmart bought the Monroeville Mall, the East in general, like people in east of the city, where people are, there's like lots of like housing stock. You have like you have all these places like Churchill and Wilkins Township and Swissvale and Forest Hills and Monroeville and all these places that have tons of housing stock that is still more affordable than the city. I don't want to jinx it, but I feel like there's this possibility that could be like where people are going to be going to because it's more affordable, for at least a little while until lots of people buy there. But and that maybe Walmart, like the coinciding with that, like with them investing in that space, like maybe you could see a resurgence in a place like Monroeville. There's also other sites out this way, like the giant Westinghouse facility that almost became an Amazon hub.
But didn't, and is still sitting there unused.
Right. And that seems to be, that's like that's actually out in this direction, and even just outside of the city, not even just east of it, but outside of the city in general. That's one of the largest parcels of land or something like that. Like that's even available still. That's like for major development because it's so many acres.
Yeah, there's that. There's Hazelwood Green. There's some little spots all over, and they're not little. They're massive spots all over Pittsburgh that like have a lot of potential, but certainly aren't malls.
Right.
But aren't yet a thing. Whatever they're gonna be, they have not realized it yet.
Right. And so I don't, and it takes time, but I do think you might see the complete, death of, Pittsburgh Mills, but you might see, South Hills Village and Ross Park Mall will probably still hang on there, niche malls will be okay. But I'm hoping that you'll see some sort of like resurgence in a place like the Monroeville Mall, or I would have said Century 3 before, but that ship has sailed. But I think there's the possibility as like Pittsburgh continues to kind of have this sort of like resurgence in like population and, growth with jobs and new businesses coming here. You might see some of these spots that were sort of like, languishing for years become more viable,
Yeah. R.I.P. Century 3. May she rest in peace.
It's a shame.
Matt, thank you so much as always.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
That's all for today here on CityCast Pittsburgh. We will have a link in the show notes to Matt's book, Shopping Mall, and his Substack, where you can check out more of his work. And if you want to learn more about the former home of Westinghouse Electric, that's the site Matt mentioned in the episode, the one that almost became an Amazon hub, we talked all about it on a previous show. That is also in the show notes, and it's worth a listen because that site has some very weird, very cool history. We will be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Talk to you then.
I've been going to Ross Park Mall a lot lately because my 14-year-old is like, he's into fragrances, and he's always working on his fit. He has all the different fits that he's wearing. I'm like, okay. And so literally that's the only mall I really go to because it's like,
So what do you do while he's checking out the fragrances?
I just kind of, I'm like his consultant, basically. Like, he just is like, so what do you think of this or this? And, and like, he's not like completely embarrassed by having me around.